Tonight I want to ask a question. What is our reason? When I think about this question, I'm actually focusing on something that I mentioned this to Jeffrey, something he has announced, but also it ties into what Chad Key just mentioned in his prayer, part of doing our part in reaching out, and especially with the event that we just had, our Harvest Festival, and then Jeffrey and others putting these baskets together. Jeffrey, when you made the announcement, you failed to realize that we had one underneath the podium. And I had this for a reason to mention. This is one that I picked out, and there's another one in the office. But there is a person's name on here that is I'm going to allude to here in a moment. But you know, sometimes it's literally looking for a reason to show up. Sometimes when it comes to trying to reach out in the community, we need to find a reason. This just happens to be part of that reason. Something to maybe continue a conversation, some reason to come by. In 1 Peter 3:13, says, "Now who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect." Notice there are people who are going to be asking you for the reason of the hope within you. They're asking, what is our reason? What is your reason? Well, it's interesting. The word for reason here is the word logos. It's the word for word. And in John 1, in verse 1, in the beginning was the word, logos, reason. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Later on in verse 14, the Word, the reason, became flesh and made His dwelling among us. Therefore, there is reason in this world. There is light in this darkness. Jesus is referred to as this Logos because He is the Word become flesh. He is reason in the flesh. Brandon Cassiopo alluded to this morning when he presided over the Lord's table at the second service. And he strung Logos together, words together that were simple but yet profound, and they defined reason. And I want to quote that for you or read that. He said, "Remember the embodiment of God suffered for you." That was profound. I wrote it down and even put Brandon Cassiopo, and I didn't say cappuccino. I actually spelled it out right. I texted it to him. And it's something I want to remember. Remember the embodiment of God suffered for you. If that's not a reason for the hope within all of us, I do not know what is. The Apostle Paul was asked for a reason. He was asked for a word, the same word, logos. In Acts 13, in verse 13 beginning, it says, "Now Paul and his companions set sail for Paphos and came to Perga in Pamphylia. And John left them and returned to Jerusalem. But they went on from Perga and came to Antioch." So this is Paul and Barnabas, and they're in Pisidia. "And on the Sabbath day, they went into the synagogue and sat down." So they're visitors, and they're coming in. And, it's interesting, verse 15. I always find this to be profound. "After the reading from the law and the prophets, the rulers of the synagogue," so the locals, the regulars, "they sent a message to the visitors." They sent a message to them saying, "Brothers, if you have any word of encouragement for the people, say it." If you have a logos, if you have a word of reason, give it. They literally are asking Paul to give a reason for the hope that is within him. So Paul took the opportunity. He had a reason to be there. Much like this basket, it's a reason to show up, and he had a reason to stand and make this decree. Now, his sermon is recorded, and it is extremely long. So I'd like for us to just draw some points that have to do with the reason that he was there. So Paul stood up, and motioning with his hand, he said, "Men of Israel, and you who fear God, listen. The God of this people, Israel, chose our fathers and made the people great during their stay in the land of Egypt, and with uplifted arm he led them out of it. Paul proceeded to lead them in their history from Egypt to the time of King Saul, from the time of King Saul to the time of King David, then John the Immerser, then the Christ. And we pick up in verse 36 of Acts 13. It says, "For David, after he had served the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep and was laid with his fathers and saw corruption. But he whom God raised up did not see corruption. Let it be known to you, therefore, brothers, that through this man forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you." He's saying through this man is the ultimate reason. "And by him everyone who believes is freed from everything from which you could not be freed by the law of Moses. Beware, therefore, lest what is said in the prophets should come about. Look, you scoffers, be astounded and perish. For I am doing a work in your days, a work that you will not believe, even if one tells you." Even if you've got a reason to show up, some people might not want that reason. They may not want this basket. They may not want that opportunity, but it is yet another opportunity for us to be there. In the same way, Paul could have sit there and he said, these individuals that I'm going to be proclaiming to, they're asking for a reason, a word. He could have said, it's no point. It's useless for me to even stand up and speak because there are going to be some that aren't going to hear. But there were some who did. See, it's interesting. He understood that there were scoffers. He understood that there were some who didn't want him to tell this. See, the Jews were devoid of reason. Yet they asked for that reason of the hope within Paul. He was ready and willing to take the opportunity, and it resonated with the Gentiles who were there in the synagogue. They would have been the proselytes on the outside of the circle, literally on that outside bench. It resonated with them because we read in verse 46 of Acts 13, it says, "And Paul and Barnabas spoke out boldly, saying, it was necessary that the word, logos, of God be spoken first to you, Jews. Since you thrust it aside and judge yourselves unworthy of eternal life, behold, we are turning to the Gentiles." You see, he gave them an opportunity. He gave the reason for the hope that's within them. Whether they were going to take it or not, it was up to them. And he explains that or defines that by judging themselves unworthy. The problem is when we don't take the opportunities to go, we are judging others unworthy, thinking that they're just not going to listen. Our job is to take the gospel message. Our job is to provide opportunities and allow them to make that judgment for themselves and not that judgment come from us. "Behold, we are turning to the Gentiles," he said. Verse 47, "For so the Lord has commanded us, saying, I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. And when the Gentiles heard this, they began rejoicing and glorifying the word of the Lord. And as many as were appointed to eternal life believed, and the word, logos, of the Lord was spreading throughout the whole region." The reason for the hope that was within them continued to spread. Why? Because they took the opportunities when they came knocking at the door, and they sent the message. They stood and made the proclamation. The word of the Lord will continue to spread. Sometimes it's literally looking for a reason to come by, a reason to carry on the conversation. Now, I put "the" there in all bold because this is Jennifer. No, it's her basket. The name on here is Jennifer. And it was about maybe 2 years ago at Pizza with Santa. I just happened to, sometimes I like to float. I like to go around and just have conversations with folks. And sometimes I've gone in that line that went, pre-COVID. We went all throughout this auditorium and just had a conversation with a family. Sometimes I've done kind of like what Chad Key has done and gone in where the fellowship hall is and just sit and talk with people and have those conversations. And this one time I sat with Jennifer and with Carla, and I met Jennifer's son Andrew and Ariana, their daughter, and we just had a great conversation. I had that some of you see as a monstrosity of a Santa Claus hat that has an Alabama A sewed on it. And I had that there, and they all said, roll tide. And I said, well, I'm going to sit down. And had an opportunity just to have this discussion. And I noticed that Jennifer had a carpal tunnel surgery on her left hand. And we just got into the conversation and said that Andrew was being homeschooled. I said I was homeschooled. I said that may not be a good reference for you. You may want to put him in public school right away. I don't know. And so we just got into this conversation, and that was that. Well, while I had another monstrosity recently with the old man beard and that horrible coat that I was sweating profusely out there in that parking lot, I see Jennifer show up. I couldn't remember her name. I said, man, I know who this is, but I saw her daughter. I said, you're Ariana, aren't you? She said, I am. I said, and what was your Jennifer? Well, she had a carpal tunnel surgery on her left hand. Well, she had another one on her right. I said, didn't you have that last time? And the whole time I've got the beard on. I took the beard off. I'm like, I'm the guy that had that crazy hat. We get in this conversation. You see, her mother wasn't there. Carla wasn't there. But when she was at Pizza with Santa, she had indicated she wanted a Bible study. I had called Carla and had a conversation with her. We were trying to schedule that Bible study. Well, when I was going through all of the baskets, I noticed Jennifer, and I compared the address to the address I had for Carla. It's the same. Another opportunity to carry on the conversation. And I'm looking forward to that. And so I want you to think about just that as an illustration of what we're striving to do. We're simply planting seeds. We're carrying on conversations. We're having meaningful relationships with people in this community. And we have opportunities. And sometimes it's literally looking for a reason to come by. Looking for a reason for the hope that is within all of us. And it could be just simply going and knocking on the door. Tonight, what is your reason? Do you have hope within you? Maybe your resolve is struggling tonight. Can we encourage you? Whatever your need is, please respond now while together we stand and while we sing.